So, Yossi Amram, PhD, is a clinical psychologist, a CEO coach, and an award winning author. He has advised over 100 CEOs, many of whom manage thousands of employees and revenues in the billions. With degrees from MIT and Harvard and a PhD from Sophia University, he is a pioneering researcher in the field of spiritual intelligence, whose work have been cited over 1,000 times. As the author of Spiritually Intelligent Leadership, How to Inspire by Being Inspired, Yossi is committed to awakening greater spiritual intelligence in himself and the world. So he is the founder of truemasculinity.org, engendering-love.org, and awakeningsi.org. That's really great interaction of Yossi. So Yossi, you can start your presentation. So we will share your PowerPoint presentation from our side. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for putting up with all these technical challenges. Spiritually intelligent or not, I'm still tech imbecile. Uh, anyway, so what I'm going to be talking about is about spiritual intelligence, which is, I believe, an outgrowth of the field of positive psychology and how it could be used in psychotherapy and integrated to move therapy to another level beyond just addressing problems like anxiety or depression, to really cultivate the highest potential of humanity. So when we talk about spiritual intelligence, we can click to the second slide here, please. What is intelligence? And if you could please move the thing forward to the next slide from the title. Okay, yeah. What is intelligence? Thank you. So intelligence in general is a set of abilities that we use to solve problems and create products that are valuable within a cultural context. And that's kind of the definition that Howard Gardner of Harvard defined in his seminal book in 1983. And that laid the foundation to this theory of multiple intelligence, that we have cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence, musical intelligence. Now, we used to think of intelligence, even IQ, as a single thing. But in reality, if you look at someone's cognitive intelligence as measured by an IQ score, it has many components. There's verbal reasoning, like comprehension and composition. There's spatial reasoning, mathematical reasoning, logical reasoning, and so on. But all of that falls under one category of cognitive intelligence, or IQ. Now, if we move to the next slide, let's look at something that has really grown in popularity, and that is emotional intelligence, which complements IQ. And up until the rise of this notion of emotional intelligence, we used to think that there's a dichotomy between emotion and reason. If you had someone that you knew, or so you asked about someone and say, oh, so-and-so is very emotional, you'd probably think that that might be a negative thing. They're dysregulated, they're a problematic person. But if you say now that they're emotional intelligence, that's a whole different thing. Emotional intelligence bridges the gap in the dichotomy between emotion and reason. And this notion was first put forward by two academicians, Solovey and Meyer, in 1990 in an academic paper, and then it was later popularized by Daniel Goleman by his book. And since then, there's been many models and validated measures that show that people who score higher on emotional intelligence have all kinds of positive outcomes, success at work and relationships and so on. So because of that, it has entered the current zeitgeist of our culture, and everybody is now understanding the importance of emotional intelligence. So next slide, please. So, what we're talking about here is the next thing, which is spiritual intelligence. And what is spiritual intelligence? So, spiritual intelligence is analogous to emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to draw on emotional resources and information to help ourselves manage our emotions and others. By analogy, spiritual intelligence is the ability to draw on and embody spiritual resources and qualities. These are qualities that have been hailed by all the world's spiritual and wisdom traditions for thousands of years, that have been viewed as virtues that are understood to help our functioning and well being in daily life. So you might say, well, what are these qualities? And through my research, interviewing 71 spiritual teachers across all the world's traditions, and then developing a psychometrically validated measure for spiritual intelligence, there are 22 capacities of spiritual intelligence that fall into my 5 domains. And these are things like purpose and service, that relate to mobilizing meanings, things like compassion, forgiveness, egolessness, integrity, humility, transcendence, and so on. And what's exciting is that these qualities of compassion and purpose and humility are viewed as virtues across all the world's traditions, whether someone is a Hindu or a Buddhist or Jewish or Christian or Muslim or shaman, earth-based. These are common qualities regardless of our cosmology, theology, whatever belief system these traditions hold. So these are universal qualities that are seen as virtues across the traditions. So next slide thing is, then you say, okay, well, these are just a collection of qualities. Okay, yeah, here are the qualities that are just being put on the screen. We're one slide behind where I'm talking. So as I mentioned, the qualities like purpose, compassion, egolessness, integrity, humility are universal across traditions. Now, what is unique about them, if you can move to the next slide, please, is is that there's the unifying theme is that these are common, first of all, across all the world's traditions, and these are the highest and fullest expression of our life force energy. So the word spiritual comes from the root in Latin of spirit or spiritus, which means the animating breath of life. And when we are connected and rooted to our life force energy, our spirit essence, we end up being interconnected to our core essence, interconnected to all other people who share in that life force energy, and ultra connected, which is connected to the sacred and transcendent dimension of all of life. And when we are rooted in that spirit essence, that life force energy, all of these qualities naturally emerge. Qualities like purpose, compassion, service, and so on. So, next slide, please. Just to clarify what spiritual intelligence is not. So, spiritual intelligence is not a belief. It's not a belief in God or a higher power or the immortality of the soul. Those are all spiritual beliefs. It's also not an experience. We may have an experience of oneness during meditation or walking in the forest. We might have an experience of communicating with angels or whatever. These would be all experiences, and beliefs could be important. But spiritual intelligence is not that. It's the ability to embody these qualities and live them in our daily life, while we're driving on the freeway, while we're shopping in the supermarket, while working at work in a work team, while we're interacting with members of our family, of our community, in our neighborhood. So it's about the embodiment and living these qualities and drawing on these resources in daily life. It's not a belief, it's not an experience. So these qualities, as I mentioned, next slide, please, are based on interviews that I conducted with 71 teachers and leaders that were nominated by their peers for the embodiment and living spiritual intelligence in daily life. And as I mentioned, these qualities were universal, regardless of their cosmology, theology, or metaphysics. And these 22 qualities clustered into 5 domains, which are shown in the next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we have 5 domains: the domain of meaning, the domain of grace, the domain of truth, consciousness, and transcendence. So, for example, the meaning domain includes qualities like purpose and service. The domain of grace includes joy, gratitude, freedom, immanence, and so forth. I know it's kind of hard to see the small font, but anyway, there are these 5 main domains: meaning, grace, truth, consciousness, and transcendence, and these 22 qualities cluster around them. So, next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned, besides these interviews that I did, I developed the first academically validated measure of spiritual intelligence. And that measure of spiritual intelligence has since been translated into over a half dozen languages and validated and used in a variety of research studies by many other researchers. And it has shown that people who score higher on spiritual intelligence have greater satisfaction with life, and greater quality of life, more resilience, better mental health, better job satisfaction, work performance, organizational performance, in a team level, leadership effectiveness. Leaders that score higher lead teams with greater morale, higher commitment, lower turnover, and they result in experiences of awe and life satisfaction. So there's an ever-growing body of research, not just by myself, but researchers all over the world that are using either my measure, and now there are other measures of spiritual intelligence as well. And all of these measures are showing that spiritual intelligence has positive outcomes. My own research has been cited now by over 1,000 academic citations. So if I can just pat myself on the back a little bit here. But my point is, beyond just my research, is that this is a growing field of academic study that all pointing in the same direction. So next slide, please. I want to talk briefly about the relationship between spiritual intelligence and the field of positive psychology. So next slide, please. So in the field of positive psychology, some of you may have heard of that there is another measure called values in action or character strengths that has been now deployed and tested on hundreds of thousands of people and have shown positive outcomes for people who score higher on these positive character strengths. And people with a higher score on that have greater happiness, more satisfaction with life, lower depression, higher purpose, improved relationships, better accomplishment, confidence, and resilience. So if we look at the next slide, please, what is interesting, there's 24 character strengths in this measure in positive psychology called values in action, which was developed by Seligman and his colleagues, Marty Seligman, who's the founder of positive psychology. And in the field of spiritual intelligence, I mentioned there are 22 qualities, and there's a high overlap. Over half, 13 of the 22 or the 24, are nearly identical. Sometimes they're slightly labeled differently, but when you look underneath, what they're aiming at is to measure the same thing: curiosity and openness, beauty, gratitude, honesty, integrity, humility, egolessness, even transcendence, and so on. So there's a high overlap between this measure of positive psychology and spiritual intelligence, which I find very interesting. So we have a convergence of modern research, both in the field of positive psychology as well in this new emerging field of spiritual intelligence, and these character strengths that were viewed as virtues for thousands of years through all these world's spiritual traditions. So we have a convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science pointing to the same thing, that qualities like hope and beauty and gratitude support our well-being, and both individually and collectively in a social context. So I would like to talk a little bit now about how this can inform our work in psychotherapy or in coaching or in other ways of working with people one-on-one. So next slide, please. And I will talk about few of my clients and how I have worked with them to cultivate these spiritual intelligence qualities and how that supported their growth and evolution and thriving and actualizing their potential. So next slide, please. And I will talk about few case studies. So I will begin with the case of one of my clients, Peter. And one of the questions I like to ask my client, if you could flash the next slide, please. Okay, I seem to have lost the person here that's trying to navigate. But at any rate, so I will talk about a few of my clients. And one of them is Peter, who we worked on his sense of purpose. And one of the questions I like to pose to my clients is, if your life was a movie, how would you sum it up in one line? And my client Peter said, boy grows up to be a powerful man, proving others wrong. This Peter was still reacting to his childhood trauma in which he was told he would fail. And now he lived his life primarily to prove his naysayers, his bullies, wrong. So from psychological standpoint, I worked with this client to process this narrative and how those childhood bullies were still controlling him, how he views himself and his life. But from a spiritual standpoint, he and I worked to create a new story, a journey of healing and transformation. And in this new story, he would spread creativity, love, and joy by identifying his unique gifts and his talents and learning to use them to contribute and share them. And so all the spiritual intelligence subjects I interviewed in my research emphasize the importance of acting from a sense of purpose. And however you experience purpose in your life, it draws forth your unique gifts in service of a future that is waiting to be born through you. And this is something I work with many of my clients, to find that passionate engagement with life through a sense of purpose or a calling, which energizes, motivates, and inspires us. The next quality I think that I find very crucial in working with clients is that of connectedness and compassion. So I think any psychologist will stress the necessity of meaningful relationships in the client's well-being. And the SI capacity of connectedness is not just a deterrent to loneliness, loneliness being a leading cause of depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia in us culture right now, but it also motivates us and uplifts us and even transforms our pain. So one of my clients, which I shall call Bettina, was feeling dejected when the market and the economy took a downturn, and as a leader of her team, she had to initiate a layoff in her company. And she kind of got down on herself and got depressed and kind of into a victim mindset. Why is this happening to me? But to help her find her connectedness, I guided her in a Buddhist compassion practice called Tonglen, which literally means giving and receiving, in which I asked her to imagine her suffering and the suffering of her staff as gray smoke, which she inhaled directly into her heart. There, it transmuted into a clear, bright energy of compassion. And then she exhaled that compassionate, loving energy from the middle of her chest back out, imagining herself and those in similar situations receiving it. So she began doing this, and I was like, why would I want to inhale this negative energy? But the heart has an amazing alchemical capacity, transform this suffering, this gray smoke, into golden light. And to aid her, I invited her to put in her heart the image of someone she held as a compassionate role model. So, some people, it could be Jesus or the Buddha or Kuan Yin or a grandparent who always embodied compassion. And we put them in our heart. They give us the support to do this transmuting process. And so Bettina then described the outflowing energy as golden light, and she started to experience more expansiveness and openness her face with a glowing warmth in her chest. So while traditional psychology was helpful and therapy helpful for this client, integrating what this spiritual practice into her therapy gave her readiness that she didn't have before. And through Tonglen, she could see how she wasn't alone in her suffering, and that she could use her heart's capacity to transform suffering into kind and compassionate, soothing energy. And rooted in her compassion, she was then able to be prepared to dive in and tackle the challenges and communicate this in a compassionate way with her team. And this is something that every one of my participants in interviews in my research highlighted, that our interconnectedness and interdependence is crucial for how they show up in their relationships and their families and communities and in work. And when we have that sense of shared humanity, our suffering is not added with an extra layer of judgment. We're not the only ones suffering. This is part of the human condition, and it exercises our heart's capacity to feel connected and in warmth and kindness, both to ourselves and others. Another quality and case study maybe that I'll talk about is higher self, in which I find very powerful and important. So, which is the higher self is our capacity to connect to our inner wisdom and accessing our better imagined self, which could serve as an immense resource for guidance. So for one of my clients, I call Katya, she was struggling with a very uncomfortable confrontation in her work. And what I invited her to do is to follow a meditation of active imagination as formulated in Jungian psychology by Carl Jung. And in this meditation, I invited her to encounter her future aspirational self, the kind of person she wants to be 10 years out, more grounded, more confident, more open hearted. And then in meeting this future self and interviewing them, she was able to get some sage advice. But just that image started to become a seed that she's now planted in her psyche. And the more she communicated and interacted with this image, it started to become a reality. And she could then start to embody this future self in the present moment. And so her evolution and who she became started to evolve rapidly. And when we connect to this higher self, we basically tap into a vast evolutionary power and intelligence that is beyond our individual egoic mind. And and this could be, the higher self could be accessed through our future self, could be through a dialogue with a grandparent or a spiritual teacher or anybody we admire that embodies the kind of person we want to become. So, yeah, so let's move to the next and last slide here, which is spiritual intelligence basically is the outgrowth of positive psychology, which is rather than simply focusing on curing disease, let's support health and wellness. And the cultivation of these qualities of spiritual intelligence goes hand in hand in the reduction of negative symptoms in therapy and addressing the fundamental issues that contribute to human suffering, including mortality, meaning the desire to be our unique, authentic self and free while at the same time belonging, really requires, in my experience, an SI, a spiritual intelligence lens. And if just you looking at it through traditional psychological approaches, we kind of reach a glass ceiling in terms of the capacity to thrive and grow and reach the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So with that, I will stop and we'll go to any questions or discussions that any reactions. I know I've said a lot. I talked fast, so we can all take a breath, connect with ourselves, our hearts, our feet on the ground, and see how all of this is landing in this moment and what questions, reactions might come up for you. Any questions, comments? Okay, well, if no questions are coming up, let me just hello.
Yeah.
Wow,
Hello.
you see that wonderful presentation. We really drew the audience today with a great speech. Thank you so much for encouraging us with your speech today with the Global Virtual Summit 2024. So we look forward at the same support and the same spirit for our future conferences as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, we do have other event coming up in line in the month of November 7th and 8th virtually, and March 8th and 9th in Paris, France. So, hope everyone will continue the same journey with Global Virtual Summit 2024 with our future conference as well, UOC. So, yes, we do have questions from our audience. So I have picked up the best question for you, Yossi.
Okay.
How can we cultivate spiritual intelligence in our daily lives?
Okay, that's a big question. I think, like anything, you have to start small and build some habits. So there are 22 capacities of spiritual intelligence. And I think my suggestion is to pick one of them that you want to work on. It could be a gratitude one, for example. And for a month, build a habit to do a gratitude journal every night before you go to bed. Journal 3-5 things, and then once you kind of get in that habit, go through your day. As you go through the day, look for what could I be grateful for right now. I'm grateful that you're asking me this question, that are engaged, interested. And so just when I reflect on that, I feel enlivened. A smile comes onto my face. So if I start to cultivate gratitude, then I can work on another. Once I have the habits of gratitude, then I can work on something else. It could be joy, it could be purpose, it could be beauty. If I'm looking at purpose, what are my unique gifts in life, and how can I use them to contribute and meet certain needs in the world? And that energizes me. But a lot of it also can start at the root by feeling into our life force energy. So right now, for example, we could do this, if you're willing, is just take a couple of deep breaths, feeling the rise and fall of the belly and chest, the breath. That's how our life force is experienced biologically. And then, secondly, just tuning into our heart, which is the other place we could feel the pulsating flow of life through our blood and through the heart. And then feeling the support of Mother Earth, the feet, the legs into the ground, the spine, which is the information superhighway of the body, connecting all the nervous system, the distributed intelligence, all the neurons for all the brain centers, and just feeling the impact on the presence when we're connected to our breath, our heart, rooted in the earth, and feeling the flow of energy and through our information superhighway and the central channel of the spine. And I don't know if you're experiencing, but you could feel this. You can experience this alive presence. And when you're rooted in this alive presence, some of these other qualities naturally come up. And then again, you want to build practices to reinforce them. So, anyway, I hope that gives you a taste. Any other questions?
Yeah, you really answered in a detailed way, Yossi. Thank you so much for making it in an understandable way. And please do join our next speakers sessions as well, and post your questions and encourage other speakers and motivate each other. Let's motivate each other. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste. Yeah, thanks for helping with the presentation. I'm sorry.